but maybe if people are going to drop in, maybe we should get started and make a little break to do that, to make sure that if somebody drops in later, they also have a chance to share their homework. How does that sound?
We should ask the participants if they think, I presume it's okay.
Does anybody, yeah, let's ask them if anybody was here the last time and found their social entrepreneurship hero and would like to present it to the group. Okay, so I assume that nobody would like to present right now. And as far as I can tell, we do have some people that weren't here the last time. Am I correct, Anna?
Seems to be so. The right number of, well, we invited the same people who were present or registered for the first webinar.
Okay, so
but some of the people joined for the first time, even they registered maybe before.
Okay, so just in case, I'm just gonna introduce myself very shortly in case there is somebody here who wasn't the last time. So my name is Tamara Puhovski. I am at the moment, and you can see by my face, in very hot Croatia summer in the capital. I run Impact House, which is a company that specializes in policy, corporate, and community impact. And this corporation is also social enterprise. So we do a lot of work with social enterprise and run our own social enterprise. And I also started another 2 social enterprises, or was one of the founders in other 2 social enterprises that now work on their own. So it is a great pleasure to be here today. Last time we talked about social entrepreneurship and what does it mean and how do we know if a company is a social enterprise or not, and some practical examples of how it works, as well as the EU framework of social enterprises. And the idea today is to go a little bit beyond. So if you think about social impact, which is the topic of today, a social enterprise is a specific kind of organization. And we have, like we discussed the last time, very specific rules, what it must do on the market and how, and vis-a-vis its profits and returns in order to qualify as a, and the way it's run in order to qualify as a social enterprise. However, meeting all those criteria and being a social enterprise is not the only way for us to do some good in the world or to have a social impact. So the idea was that we today discuss what is this social impact that everybody's talking about, with some examples of how to manage and measure it and some terminology connected to it. The reason for choosing this topic is that a social impact is really a buzzword that is very common nowadays, but there is so many different terms connected to it that not a lot of people know exactly what we are talking about when we say social impact, and also don't really know how to approach it. I think most importantly, there are two reasons why social impact is important. Number one, for ourselves, so that we know what we are changing. And number two, whether you are a company, so you're looking at impact investors, or you are an NGO and you have to file your reports, more and more, whatever the source of your funding is. And thirdly, of course, if it's your customers, whoever invested, whether it was an impact investor, your customer, or an organization providing a fund, more and more they will be asking for concrete proof that you had a positive social impact in whatever you chose to do. And this is why it's important to kind of go over it and explain it, which I will attempt to do, although it's a very, very hard topic. And also what I have to mention is that I'm a sociologist and a political scientist. So the way that I look at it and analyze it, maybe it's a little bit more closer to social science, but then also with the perspective of being a social entrepreneur myself. Okay, so I will be taking you through this presentation, and then we will make a stop to see if anybody would like to present, because the last time I asked you to choose a social entrepreneur and then tell us what you think their impact is and why you chose them. So if anybody wants to do that, please let me know. And after each slide, I will have a look at the chat where you can ask questions, or you can raise your hand and tell us something or intervene. Yeah, I think that we can go ahead. Let me see if there are any. Okay, so first time here. Okay, so then let's start with social impact. So just to make sure that you understand anything that we talked about last time, if I refer to that, it's not crucial for the understanding of this webinar on social impact. This is a broader and somewhat different issue. Okay, so I'll be slowly presenting, and then I will go back and forth to see if anybody has anything to add. We have approximately until 6:30, but the time will also depend since about half an hour was foreseen for the presentations from homework and interventions. So it will depend on how interactive we are and how heated this debate gets. Okay, so let me start with social impact. So I explained why we chose this topic and how big of a term it became. And so that you don't just listen and watch me, I wanted to start with a short video on what is sometimes called the impact revolution. So we can have a look at that now and then discuss if it's a true revolution, evolution, or just something we've been doing all along.
There is a quiet revolution afoot. It may not be as loud as the technology revolution, but some experts predict it will be just as transformative. Its reverberations are being felt across executive boardrooms, foundation offices, state houses, and startups. And it's fundamentally shifting the way investments are made, policies are penned, funds are endowed, and careers are chosen. This movement, which has been dubbed the Impact Revolution, advances a vision of doing well while doing measurable good. Like the tech revolution before it, the impact revolution is being fueled by a rising generation. Millennials, who came of age amid unprecedented global connectivity, access to data, and economic crisis, are both uniquely skeptical and empathetic. They're demanding social responsibility from corporations, launching their own social enterprises, investing with social returns in mind, and as wealth transfers, their influence will only grow. They're embracing impact investing. First coined in 2007, and now a widely recognized investment class, one that not only considers the risk and returns of ventures, but also their concrete impact on society. Even blue-chip financial firms are responding to the growing call to prioritize social returns. Philanthropies are also evolving with this changing landscape. In addition to requiring more evidence of impact from the nonprofits they fund, they are also now pushing endowment dollars toward impact investments. In reaction, nonprofits are adapting their models to target measurable social outcomes that can attract both philanthropies and impact investors. Governments, too, are beginning to consider social returns on their investments. By funding preventative, data-driven initiatives, they can calculate cost savings and even attract investment from capital markets to scale effective social programs. Ultimately, the impact revolution is tackling urgent social challenges by aligning goals across sectors, empowering change makers with data, and channeling capital into engines for social good.
Okay. So does anybody have any kind of feedback on the video or would like to say anything? Or would you like me to just continue with the presentation? Let me just quickly check. Okay. So the reason why I chose this presentation or this video, just a second, was because there are two things that were mentioned, I think, that are important in the video. Number one was the need to do good while doing well. And this brings us back to the social entrepreneurship talk, meaning that you do want to make money or have a business, but at the same time, you do realize that it is important for you to at the same time create some good in your community or in your society and so on. That's number one. That's very important for the kind of rise of a social impact as a concept. And the second thing is when they started talking about millennials. So the profile of consumers and participants and stakeholders is different. And it's different in two ways, in my opinion. The first is the data. So with the, you know, the amount of information around us with the internet, we can check and expect much more data about the products that we use, the projects in which we participate than ever before. And secondly, this kind of information with itself brings visibility. Meaning that it's not just the data that you have on what somebody is doing or what some organization is doing, but it's also the visibility of what you are doing and what others know and perceive of your actions. This is why ensuring that you have a social impact and that you present the social impact you have has become extremely important. So let us kind of dive into what social impact is. And a good way to go about it, so I'm gonna look at chat now because I have a question for you. Who is the most famous superhero that doesn't have any superpowers? Does anybody know? Let me see who is going to be the first to answer this question. So you can just write it in chat. Let's see. Let's see. Mandela? No, I mean, when I say a superhero, absolutely Mandela, I mean a fictional character like Superman or, you know. So Superman has superpowers. Trump. Yeah, I don't think Trump is a superhero. Yes, Batman. Who said Batman? Somebody said Batman. Varun? So yeah, Batman. And so Batman doesn't have any extraordinary, oh, Peter Pan does have extraordinary powers. He can fly, for example. So Batman, in fact, doesn't have any superpower. He was not bit by a spider. He is not extra super strong. He doesn't have whatever power Superman had. I'm not very good with superheroes. But what is the power of Batman? Why is he a superhero? So because he's an impact investor. So he uses his funds to create positive social change. So every time somebody asks you about social impact or what an impact investor is, just think of Batman. So it's a person, in his case, I would say impact investor because he has a lot of funds that uses the money for social good. And then once we go through this lecture, we can then discuss in the end, is Batman a philanthropist or a social entrepreneur? So this, hopefully you'll be able to answer by the end of the lecture. So what is impact investment? If you remember the video, it was kind of based more on business end of creating social impact than on the non-for-profit way of creating social impact. And more investors, when they invest into your endeavor or your project, besides just the return on investment, so if I give you a 10 million euro, I expect that within, I don't know, 3 years, I'm going to get the 10 million back plus a certain interest. But on top of that, as an impact investor, I would expect that you also prove that besides the financial interest, so that that you're making money, you are also making a so-called social return on investment, which means that for the money that you invested, you're creating a positive social impact. In recent years, actually, the term social impact has become even more popular than social innovation. For a while, social innovation was kind of leading, I would say. One of the reasons I believe, and this is, I'm telling you my opinion now, not a fact. One of the reasons for this is that we are changing where we are in this kind of what they call the impact revolution. When we started on the very beginning, it was all about innovating and new things and so on, but now we're kind of progressing towards focusing on creating durable change. So you have the Social Impact Initiative, you have the Social Impact Award, you have a lot of kind of movement and activity around social impact. So it's therefore important to know what it means, what was the goal that we are trying to reach today. Okay, so are there any questions or contributions? Besides, this was a very good guess. I have to say not a lot of people guess Batman at the beginning. Let me check to see if there is any questions. Okay, so I don't see any questions. So I will just go on and, feel free to interrupt me, write a question in chat, and I'll do my best to answer it. If not, I can always refer you to an answer later on. Okay. So let us dive in. There is so much chatter going around the social impact that very often you can't tell the forest from its trees. So I decided to kind of separate the terminology and try and explain where social impact comes in and what is the difference between social impact, social innovation, social effects, and all these other things that you hear. Okay, so let us start. The first thing is that whatever we do, whether as individuals or as organizations, as businesses, as NGOs, will impact positively and negatively other people, communities, environment, and so on. That would mean that because we are generating some sort of change, we have a certain responsibility for that. And this is where the term social responsibility comes in. So living in a society means that our actions affect others and the planet and, you know, animals and everything. And that in return means that we have a responsibility on the change that we create. The whole thing about social impact is taking that responsibility into consciously trying to plan and manage what kind of change you're creating. So the first thing that we talk about is our social responsibility as an individual, as an organization, as a company. There are various things that include being socially responsible, from sustainable actions to what is our ethics, what is the ethical thing to do, to philanthropy. Do we have the social responsibility to help others in any way that we can? To, of course, ecological and environmental responsibility, and so on. And these are, of course, the questions that we ask ourselves as individuals, but we also have to ask ourselves on the organizational level, whether we are a business, an NGO, and whatever form our professional life takes. We then ask that same question, not as an individual, but as an organization. What kind of change are we creating, positive and negative change? What is our responsibility? And how can we manage that change? How can we influence it? So how do you approach this process that's in front of you? So the first thing would be ideation. And this is where social innovation comes in. So you're trying to think of ideas, new approaches. You're trying to plan how you are going to change or impact the community that either you're working with or living with or having some kind of a planned contact with. That's the first step. Then you will implement your idea, and that will create social effects. Now, what is the difference between social effects and social impact? For example, I'll give you an example. You decide to do, let's say, a webinar. And in that webinar, you think that you possess a certain experience or knowledge, and that your responsibility is to share it with others. So you think of a thing to do. Let's say you decide, okay, I'll go to the main square and I'll get a box, I'll stand on the box and I'll, deliver a lecture in the main square, and then, people can, instead of money, drop in questions, for example. You have an innovative way to share your knowledge. And streamlining, so it's a webinar. Now, the difference between your social effects and social impact are the following. The social effects are the results that you have. So this is going to be something like, okay, 50 people heard me speak, 10 questions were asked, and this went on for 5 days. So these are the actual effects of your actions. A lot of people will cite social effects as social impact. However, the fact that 50 people heard me, or that 10 people had questions, or that I did this for 5 days, says nothing about what the change that I wanted to create was. I wanted to share the knowledge, and I wanted that knowledge to change or give opportunity to other people. The fact that 50 people heard me, that 10 people asked questions, and that I did this for 5 days doesn't necessarily mean that I created change, in the sense that that was valuable to them, or that it opened up some doors for them, or that it made sense for them to do something differently, which then generated something positive. So you do have to measure your effects, but then you have to also measure, understand, and plan what the actual impact is. What was the change that you were trying to achieve? and did the effects, so those 50 people and 10 questions in 5 days that you did manage to achieve, actually result in the change, in the impact that you wanted. So hopefully this makes sense in the difference between what is our social responsibility, what is our social innovation or ideation, what are the social effects of what we do, and then what is the social impact. So if you look at the first, a lot of companies will stay just with this. We have a social responsibility, we do this and this, and that's it. Social innovation, this is my very specific area of work that I do. So I call it social impact hacking. We can talk about it later if you want, which is we trying to find kind of new innovative shortcuts that can create much more impact in a different way. The social effects are, usually quantifiable results that we had. So if you look at the situation before you intervened and the situation after, how can you describe that change? So before I started speaking in the main square and after I started speaking in the main square, the actual change was the 50 people, the 10 questions and the 5 days. And then the social impact is, have we made the change that we were trying to make? Do people know more? Did this help people? The knowledge that they heard, did that change in a positive way, made their work easier, and so on? So this is the actual impact we are looking at. And importantly, let me just try and make this a bit better for you now. Importantly, throughout this process, you manage and measure your social impact. What does that mean? It means that what we talked about before, you have a social responsibility, and you know that you are creating some kind of a change. But in order to maximize that change, in order to understand what you're doing good and what you're not doing so good, and to then change the way you're doing it so that you can do the change that you want to see happen, you do have to manage and measure what is happening. For example, if sharing your knowledge in order to empower people or make their jobs easier is something that you want to do, and then you have an idea how to do it, let's say you will speak in the main square, and then you will measure not just the effects that you have, but the impact. So you have to ask those people and you have to follow, so this is the hard part, you have to follow through to see how many of them use that knowledge afterwards, how many of them Googled further, how many of them had a discussion with their friends about it, whatever way you define this change happening. And then you go back to the beginning, to your responsibility and to the innovation, and you say, okay, are there ways that I can change this so that I have better effects and better impact? For example, if I do a gamified app with my knowledge, or if I do this in a school, or if I do this on the beach while people are, sunbathing, or if I do it singing instead of talking, what can I do differently to raise the things that are important for me for change? So throughout the whole process of your activities, you measure what's the impact that you want to reach. You look if you are reaching it, and you manage your actions, your projects, your products, your services, so that you can get those numbers and those indicators up. Does this make sense to everybody? I'm going to stop a little bit to see if you have any questions. No, we still have Peter Pan and Batman. Okay, so I'm assuming this makes sense to everybody. Clear? Okay, thank you, Oksana, for the feedback. So now this, I hope this makes sense. I've tried to kind of simplify it. However, of course, it is not simple. As we have some 250 214, but I think we're now going to 250 ways of measuring impact. So social impact measurements. You see that Inspiring Impact Resource Hub is quoting 214 social impact measurement tools, including SROI, which is social internal investment, Inspiring Impact, Measure Up, Outcome Star. So these are all different tools that you can use to measure your impact. And there is a whole forest of them and how to do it. Okay. Let me just go to the next part. So what is happening now and why is measuring our impact so important? For two reasons, as I've said before. Number one, for example, I'll give you, so in the end, I will show you how we measure impact in my company and some concrete examples. Since we don't, in my company, we are 100% of the market, which means we don't do any projects and we don't work with donors. So it means that we don't have the obligation to report because a lot of people do impact measurement because they do have a they have an obligation to report the social impact. But we do it because we have an obligation to ourselves to manage how we impact and create change. So there are two main reasons why you measure social impact. Number one, so that you can manage it, so that you know if what you're trying to achieve is actually happening, and that you can try and do it even better. So you will say, okay, we did this, but this didn't work out. So if we change that, then next year or next 6 months, we can raise our positive social impact. Of course, you have to measure your negative social impact as well, which people rarely do. The second part is the reporting that you do to either your donors, your impact investors, or your customers. This is the second reason of social impact measurement. Now we come to the problem. If you have 214 or 250 ways of measuring social impact, how can we compare? So how do you know that my company, based on our social impact report, is doing better or worse compared to some other company if we are not using the same measurement data? So does this forest have any rangers? Are there any rules? So if you're interested in this part, there's the Impact Management Project. The Impact Management Project is a community. So how they define themselves is that it's a forum for organizations to build consensus on how to measure, compare, and report impacts on environmental and social issues. So basically, this is over 2,000 organizations that got together and are trying to work towards creating a comprehensive, unified tool for measuring social impact. So it's a lot of debate and expertise and discussion on impact management techniques. So it's not just about measurement, it's always about managing impact. And you can look them up. I don't want to go into details now of how they're trying to achieve that. They often throw out some conclusions and recommendations and so on. My suggestion, the three things that I would suggest to all of you if you're trying to generate some kind of a change, just thinking about impact measurement and impact management is extremely important. If you want to measure your impact, make it very simple for yourself. If you can, get experts to do it for you. So if you're planning a project, always try to work into the budget funds for an outside expert who can do your social impact measurement, because it is a let's say, a challenging thing to do, at least to set it up, then you can follow it yourself. If you are working with impact investors and so on, you will have to do it anyway. If you are a social enterprise, try and follow your indicators or what you're trying to change and present it to your customers. It's extremely important if you are a social enterprise or an impact business. So you can have a look, but it is a very challenging field that usually requires expertise, at least to set it up. So usually you can get some help with setting up your expertise. Okay, so now that we've talked about, okay, so let me check the chat. We did a little bit about what social impact is, how it differs from social responsibility, social innovation, and so on. Can I recommend online sources? Yes, to measure social impact. So I will email you this presentation and I will email you some other resources. There is 214 different ones, so I will send you a link to some of them. But really, you would have to decide what kind of an approach. And once we go through this whole presentation, I think it will be maybe a bit clearer what would be good. It really depends on what you're doing. But I will send some resources, and then, you know, you can ask me specific things as well. I will leave my email, or to the wonderful organizers of this webinar, they can always connect you with me. Okay, so now that we went kind of through that forest, let's have a little quick look at the history of social impact. So I will read the following quote, which is one of the first mentions that I could find of social impact that I remember from my studies as a sociologist. And then the next question, the next quiz for you after the superhero quiz, is to guess which year this was written in. And there are some clues in the text itself. Okay, so just write the year in chat. The goal of social impact assessment is to help individuals and communities, as well as government and private sector organizations, to understand and better anticipate the possible social consequences for human populations and communities of planned and unplanned social change resulting from proposed policies, plans, programs, and projects. Okay. What would you say? What year? Okay, so we got an email, we'll send all the materials. Let me see, what are the guesses? What would you say was the year this was written in? Are there any guesses? 82? Ooh, it's pretty close. Why do you think it's 82? Anybody else? Or should I give it away? 89. Actually, you're getting a bit colder. So yeah, just a guess. It was 1970. And it's actually a part of the US Environmental Agency Act. So it's a piece of legislation. And these kind of mentions of social impact were actually done by the government when they were assessing the impacts of their programs, policies, and so on. I think it's interesting that you can tell that it's very human-centric. So this I think tells you the kind of date of it, the dating. So it anticipates the possible social consequences for human populations and communities. There is no mention of the impact on, for example, environment, which at that time was not that common, which is why we are here at the moment facing, I think, climate change. Okay. But very interestingly, today you would probably not get such small focus on private sector organizations, which are coming last here, after individuals, communities, and government perceived as main stakeholders, all those who are having a social impact on the community and human population. We would now, of course, include environment here. And if you look at it, it goes back to the definition and the discussion we had. So to understand and better anticipate the possible social consequences. So it's not just to see what you've done, but to better plan what you are doing to change those human populations and communities by implementing your policies, plans, programs, and projects. Okay. If that is clear, so this is one of the first mentions that I know of social impact. And I do know that, for example, in sociology and in the academy, when I was studying way back in the 90s, we referred to it as positive social change. So it was basically the same thing, just that we use the term change and not impact, which has now become more common, let's say. But if somebody says creating positive social change, they're basically talking about the same thing. Okay, so if there are no questions, I think that we can continue to the future. So we looked at what social impact is. We kind of looked at the past of social impact and how it was defined. And now let us look at the future. So what I did was I took out the, quotes from some of the heads of major corporations to see what they have to say about social impact. Okay, so first from Catalyst, Maureen Carlson shares, it's time to invest in social impact. By invest, we don't mean creating larger budgets to have more funds to donate to causes. We mean investing in your social impact team and staff. There are many things that they could be doing with a little budget that can exponentially help. I like this quote because this is where we see the shift from philanthropy to integrating social impact into the process of doing business. So it's not about increasing the amount of money for the things that you feel socially responsible for, but it's about understanding that people who work in your company should be on day-to-day basis considering social impact that you are having. Okay, let's look at the second one. This was from Catalyst. Okay, public corporate utilities advises. Make social impact, just a second, a part of your business strategy. This requires creating a unified impact platform that outlines the issue you should tackle. So this is what we talked about. What is your social responsibility? Because your business success depends on it over the long term. How it aligns with your short to medium term business goals and objectives. How to engage employees and consumers. How to live it through your brand. And the measurable social and business outcomes you see. So this is more of a perspective of looking specifically at what is the environment or the community that is ensuring your business success, long-term and short-term. What do you need to do to reach your business goals? And then how you are measuring and managing the impact that you are having through doing that. And this is something that we discussed the last time with the 5 Ps for those who were here, in understanding what impact your business or your social enterprise creates. Okay, let's move to the next one. So the Fashion Institute of Technology Foundation, Phil McCarthy says, brands must embrace conscious consumerism fully and chart the course towards sustainability. Sustainability is now a key factor in the decision consumers are making, particularly the Gen Z audience, Generation Z. while the demands of the consumers will increase in this area, companies must, and then he goes on to talk about this connection between your consumers wanting not just your product or your service, but wanting you to prove that what you are selling them and how it was produced didn't create any negative social change or social impact, at least, if not that it created some kind of a positive social change or a positive impact. So this is a connection between social impact and customer gain, customer retention, brand, and so on. Let's look at the next one. For Momentum's Molly Reek counsels, as employees become more involved in CSR initiatives, so it's corporate social responsibility initiatives, by taking the lead using social media platforms to share stories at an individual level, customers will hear how the purchase truly makes a difference. There will be a move away from highly branded content to authentic content. So this is now, we went through the quotes as, okay, integrate it into your business. Think about the environment that enables your business. Think about what your consumers want. And now we are to visibility and public relations. So it's not about, you know, posting messages such as we care about women. It's about women working in your company or women buying your products, sharing on social media, I bought this, or I work here, and this is how they care about women. So it has to be authentic. It cannot be kind of a statement without actually living, measuring, proving data, quotes, authentic testimonials from your customers and your employees that you are actually considering implementing, managing, and measuring your social impact. Okay, so influence, Derek Fieldman says, to drive change on an issue, don't forget to invest talent, knowledge, insight, technology, and financial resources in building the movement of the issue that is important to the company. So this is kind of bringing it all together to say, you know, what are the issues that matter to you? And you have to invest not just money, but talent, knowledge, people, technology into the issue to create a movement in the company. So Tim Moynihan, he's the executive of the Global Reporting Index. And this is very interesting because so this is a big global metrics for reporting on corporate social responsibility. And he says in the past decade, there has been a tremendous upswing in interest coming from the financial sector, with over 90% of the largest companies now filing sustainability report, 85% of the S&P 500. The data is plentiful, but that is not new. What is new is that interest in using the information for investment decisions. So what he's saying is that we know that most of the big companies do file their sustainability reports. So they do at the end of the year, when they do their financial report, they also do a report on how sustainable their practices were. I know, for example, now from a colleague in UK that they're working on also they're accountants, and they're working on how to show equality through, let's say, accounting. How do you show, not that you've just been sustainable, but how do you show that the money that went into your company and out of your company generated more equality? So we do know that there is an increase in reporting on the impact that you had, but more interestingly, this information is used for investing. So this makes it very important, of course, and this makes it I think very serious, because when investors and financial organizations are looking at not just your financial report, but your social impact report or your sustainability report or your equality report, that makes it a very important business responsibility for your company, not just towards your community. Yes, invest talent. I think it's very important. And in my experience in working with corporations, and this is the next slide that I will be going to, actually integrating impact into the existing team in the company is extremely important, to get people who are talented, who are doing great things, because usually in companies, when it comes to corporate social responsibility or whatever, however they structure their impact management and reporting, it's usually, you know, one person who does philanthropy or one person in the PR department and so on. So it's not the innovative people, it's not the creative people, it's not the people who do core business, but it's usually somewhere on the you know, outskirts of the company. And this is what these people are saying, that cannot continue. It has to be at the core, it has to be invested in. Okay, are there any other questions? So now we looked at the concept, we looked at the history, we looked at what, you know, the top managers are saying about impact in the future. And now I wanted to bring it home with some examples from my work on social impact to make it maybe more palpable. So are there any other questions? Or should we proceed? Okay. Let's proceed. So how does that all work in practice in my experience? Working with corporations or startups, so mostly businesses, not so much when I work with communities or NGOs, because they're more familiar with the concept of impact and it's kind of what drives them in the first place. But when working with businesses, here are, I did some analysis last week of my clients and how they reacted, what kind of feedback we get when we work on social impact with them. And I categorized it. So this is also part of how you can do your impact measurement. I categorized it. So you can see that we should do good, we should create good, we should have a positive social impact, is something that is really, the green means that, you know, people agree with it. This is the part of the conversation that is, of course, makes sense to everybody. We should do good. Then the other argument that you often have is this will help our visibility, this will help our brand, this will help our reputation. Working with companies, working with social entrepreneurships, working with businesses, most of the people will agree to this. So there's going to be a high level of acceptance of having to do social impact, whatever, because of visibility, brand, reputation, or because to do good. Then when it comes to sales, customers, and loyalty, this is 50-50. So it's still not clear to everybody we work with, all the businesses and so on, that in the future, and we know this for a fact, and this was in the video that we played, if you remember, the generation that's coming as customers, if you want them as customers and if you want their loyalty, if you want them to stay with you, positive social impact will be extremely important. Let me just stop quickly to check the Q&A. I think we have a question. For some reason I can't open it. I don't know, I can't open it, so if you can just write it in chat, that would be great. Okay, so then the second, probably the hardest thing for people we work with when it comes to social impact is that they're going to say, yes, it's something, of course we want to do good, of course it will help our visibility, it will probably help customer loyalty or sales, but we don't have any resources to do it. And then, so we are going down to fears. We started with, you know, why do it? Because it's good, because visibility, because sales. Now, why not do it? We don't have any resources. Secondly, it can backfire. We can be accused of whitewashing or greenwashing. If we, you know, how are we going to do a social impact project on equality when the salaries that we pay on employees are low? Or how can we finance or implement or support an environmental project when we know we are creating this much CO2? That will backfire. They will tell us that you know, we are not doing what we are preaching, and they're going to accuse us of whitewashing and greenwashing. This is especially true for businesses that have a core business that's, let's say, problematic. For example, sugar industry, oil industry, cigarettes. Like, for example, if you look at Philip Morris, you can see one of the best PR social impact campaigns that I've ever seen. Okay. And then one of the things so that I hear most often for reasons not to do social impact, no resources, or it's contradictory to making profit. So a lot of kind of, let's say, old school businessmen, businesswomen, usually businessmen, or entrepreneurs will say, but that's not our job. Our job is to make profit. Our job is not to create positive social impact. So this is kind of the discussion of business meets social impact that is definitely going on now, depending very much on the industry, depending on the country and kind of level of consciousness that they have, depending on their founders, or for example, if you look at IKEA, or if you look at DM, and some of the companies I'm sure exist in your countries, they are well known for their positive social impact. Some of the times it basically comes from the founder or the person in charge deciding that's what they want to do. And then the second thing that I wanted to show you was a little bit of the kind of advice that we give when we work with businesses, startups, social entrepreneurs, and so on in the area of social impact. So the green is pro, do and do nots. Do, when it comes to money, you have to integrate social impact into your budget. What's not in the budget doesn't exist. So you cannot say, oh, we don't have any money to do it, but we'll figure out how to do it on the side, because it's not going to happen. It has to have its own resources and in its own cost. What not to do, so do integrate into budget. Do not invest large sums without measuring social impacts. So don't throw money at the problem. Don't say, okay, the problem is pollution, so we are going to give 10 million for projects in the area of pollution, that's it. You have to, like we looked at before, you have to look at what kind of change you want to make, what are the effects that you are having, what are the impacts that you have, and you have to manage it. And wasting a lot of money to just, you know, donate for pollution is not going to solve the problem if you're not doing it without measuring. Do focus on core business. It's always more impactful both for the company and the society. Work your core. Means that if your core business is producing wood, wooden objects, this is where you should look at social impact. Don't invest in running marathons. So usually, because it will be more impactful, because you already have suppliers, materials, and you can probably do much more good working in your core business area than, you know, philanthropy or giving money for something that is not connected to a business at all. Do not follow trends. Be a trendsetter, not a follower. So what's happening is, for example, now a lot of money is being thrown at COVID and pandemic issues without measurement, without planning, and some of that money would be a much better use if it was used at the core of whatever business, you know, for example, a bank is doing, rather than everything going towards, you know, respirators. Not saying that we don't need respirators, but always check that, are you doing it because, you know, everybody else is doing it because it's the hot topic, or because it actually makes sense for your business and your community. Use existing resources and in-kind contributions. Sometimes if you have a van that you use for transport, but you only use it every other day, if you give it to an NGO on the day you don't use it, it could really mean a lot to them, much more than if you know, take money aside, then pay somebody to write a call, then ask NGOs to spend time on writing projects, then have somebody evaluate the project, then have project implemented in the guidelines that you gave. And then in that project, they have to write that they need transportation, and then they have to produce the receipts for that transportation. Sometimes it's really just easier to say, okay, we know that we use our van, you know, 3 out of 5 days a week. That means we have the van and the driver 2 times a week. Who can we help with our existing resources? Do not preach what you do not do yourself. So be very careful not to preach the change that you are not contributing to, or that you actually have negative impact on. Do not preach women's rights if you do not have that integrated in your business practice. Do not teach equality, you know, if you only have employees of a certain race or a certain background or a certain gender or a certain education and so on. So be very, very careful to be consistent with what you're preaching. The little bit that you have can always be a lot for somebody. A lot of the times when discussing social impact, you know, the companies or the businesses will say, but what is, you know, that van, I only have a van, I don't have any money. That can be so much for an activist on the ground. Or, you know, oh, it's just packaging for one of our products in plastic. But if you don't package that one product in plastic, it can have a big impact. So, you know, I think that don't undersell how much you can do, because you're looking at it from your perspective. If you're producing a lot, then this one product that's in plastic is nothing to you. If you know, are working with a lot of money, then a van or borrowing your accountant to somebody seems like nothing to you, but somebody working on the ground, that can actually save their project or motivate more people to join. So it can mean a lot. Avoid subcontract. This is a very kind of controversial issue, but cut out the middleman as much as you can, because, and this is going back to some of the quotes, and to investing in talent and integrating social impact in your company. Do not subcontract everything. You can, for example, when you plan your social impact, in my opinion, it would be good, especially the first time you measure it, to get somebody who is an expert in that field to help you set up measuring. But as a company, if you subcontract everything when it comes to social impact, then as a business culture and as a business, as a startup, you will not be able to preach social impact because you are not doing it. Okay, so I will stop a little bit here before we get to the last part to check if anybody wants to come in with any questions, interventions, anything at all. See, everybody is muted. Let me see if there's anything on chat. No. Okay. Okay, so some examples. This is the last part where I wanted to show you how we measure our social impact in the company and how that works in, you know, real life situation. Where do you start? So if you are doing something, You know now, hopefully, that it's extremely important that you understand what are the consequences of your actions, what's your responsibility, and what is the change that you're trying to create, what is the impact you're trying to create. So where do you start? Most experts are going to tell you to start with something called the theory of change. Now, the theory of change means the way that you see the society or the community, and what are the things that you're trying to change, and how do you see that change happening? If we go back to my, I just thought of that example, so it's probably not a very good one, but if you go back to that sharing knowledge example, your theory of change would say something like, sharing knowledge can influence motivation of people to do their work. It can make their work easier for them. It can lead to more quality of life because you're having debates. It can lead to more social responsibility because you're considering issues, and so on and so on. And the way that we can create that change is that we share our knowledge. Therefore, I propose to do this and this and this. This would be very simplified and short. What are the values that you define as important? And how does that translate into activities that you are proposing? So you start at what you think is important to change, how you see that changing, going to your activities, but stopping on the way to define your indicators. So I think that sharing knowledge is important in this field, and therefore I will speak on the main square, but I have to make pit stops and say, I will speak on the main square for 5 days and hopefully to 100 people getting 10 questions. So you say what you're trying to change and why is that important, and how you're going to do it, and then try and understand what are the important data, the important effects that you want to happen that would prove that the change that you want is happening. And then you look at the indicators. So it's 50 people, it's 10 questions, it's 5 days. And once that you measure how it impacted people, you have to ask yourself, okay, which of these do I want to raise, increase, and which time frame? So you say, okay, I want to do 10 more cities, main squares, with in next 6 months, engaging a total of 1,000 people, let's say. And that would then be your indicators. This is how you have set up the plan for your impact management. Okay, so if we look at, I told you there was hundreds and hundreds of ways of measuring social impact. One of those main ways is social return on investment. Social return on investment is a measuring tool that tries to add financial value to the change that you create. So it's basically answering a question. If I invest 1,000 euro into this project, how many euro of social value did I get in return for each euro invested? So it adds currency to the impact that you had. The reason being, as you will see, I will show you how we did it in one of our projects. The reason being that this is usually what investors like to hear, but it's also a very simple way for people to understand. When you say, you will see in the end, for every euro that was invested in this project, we generated 4.36 euro social return on investment. This was a very, very impactful project. So it was a very high return on investment. So you multiplied the funds that you invested 4.36 times while creating social return on investment. Now, the process of doing social return on investment measurement is very complicated and hard, and usually there are experts who do it, who have certificates to do it, and who of course charge to do it. as a sociologist, I would say it's a little bit arbitrary, as always when you try to use quantitative measures for qualitative data. So you are saying, I want to see how much knowledge I raised, but I'm going to say that by, I'm going to measure it in currency. So it's always quantified qualitative data, which is then an issue. So how did we do it? We organized a policy lab on climate with youth. And then you have this whole process of calculating, calculating your social return on investment in 4 stages. The stage number 1 is to just have the numbers of the stakeholders, everybody who was involved, and so on and so on. In stage number 2, you analyze how much money went into it, but it's not just the budget. It's also investment, financial value. You know, if I say, okay, you know, I did a mentoring, okay, how much would usually, even if I did it pro bono, how much would my mentoring cost? This will go in there and so on. And then you look at the outcomes, what changes? And you describe what were the changes that you managed to create. In stage 3, you start to add quantitative data to the qualitative results. So you say, how long did this take? How many people did you impact? How much change per person did you create? How important was that change? So you are pondering the change. What is the monetary value of that change that happened, and so on and so on. In stage 4, you are looking at, okay, so of all the change created, how much was actually done by my project, by me? How much will that change over the years? So is it some change that you created that's going to keep making the life of the person you impacted better forever, or just for the first year, for the next 3 years, and so on and so on? So this is the kind of things that you analyze. And then you can look and see that the project was altogether about 36,000 euro project. So it was a very small project. And we analyzed that we generated 69,000 euro of social impact. Therefore, our social return value per amount invested is 4.98, which means that every euro that went to that project created 4.98 euro of positive social change. Okay, so this is just a very short. So usually when you discuss social return on investment, that's a whole, you know, education sequence in itself. So I just wanted to kind of run through it to show you how one way of measuring is, and then I'm going to show you another type later. Do you have any questions about social return on investment, this kind of quantitative measurement of social impact? No? Okay. Okay, so besides kind of adding the currency monetary value to the social impact, what are other ways that you can evaluate your social impact? So I will show you now a draft for our social impact management and measurement for 2021 that we are at the moment working on in the company. So we are developing a whole procedure for next year. We do this each year. How are we going to measure the impact that we had with our clients and the projects that we did? We do 3 areas. So we do policy, we do corporate, and we do community. So in impacting policy, because we work in that field, and if any of you are working in that field, it can be advocacy issues, it can be campaigns, it can be, you know, working on legislation, it can be any kind of this activity. This is the kind of way that we measure. We have 4 main areas. Did we impact any kind of senior leadership? And we do ponders. So if we impact senior leadership, we are talking about systematic change. So we add, so this is 3 times more important impact. Did we impact regulatory framework? Were any laws changed? Did we impact the resources? Did we provide any new tools for people who make policy? Did we educate people who make policy? Did we impact the budget? So did we manage to positively impact the resources that people who make policy have? And as you can see, when we ask ourselves this question, we either put a plus, a minus, or a 0. This is our own methodology that I came up with. So we say, okay, yes, we impacted it positively. No, we impacted it negatively. They actually have less knowledge or less money now, or 0 if we didn't impact it at all. And then the 4th question we ask ourselves is stakeholders. What groups of people did we impact? What communities were impacted by this policy? Were they involved in the process? Did their feedback matter? This kind of, let's say, reaching out impact. And then we also always look at SDGs. So what topics and how they relate to SDGs. And then we specifically, based on a client, look at stories or information or data that we have that we integrate into this report. When working with businesses, for those people who were here for the last seminar, we use our 5P method. So we look at, did we impact the management of the company? Did we impact the product or the service? Did we impact the process of making something? Did we impact the people involved? Did we impact the profit? Or did we impact the PR? So we also ponder these things, and we analyze in working with corporates what our positive social impact on them and then theirs on the community was. And last but not least, I'm working with communities. So this is individuals, activists, communities, NGOs. We also do the analysis of our impact. If we impacted the community, did they feel more motivated? Do they have any kind of concrete plan for working on this issue further? Was there any media coverage, public opinion? And the people that we work with, are they in the leadership position? Can they create systematic change? Did we provide long-term support, or was it just a short-term intervention? Did we provide resources? So did we leave them with something that they can use in their work, in their activism in the community? And did we impact those in need? This is where we ask ourselves, okay, the people we work with, were they geographically in underdeveloped regions? Were they discriminated based on gender or excluded? Were they socially marginalized? So we ask ourselves also, of course, that we think we have a stronger positive social impact if we have worked with those who are excluded or have less power in some way. And then we, of course, ask if we impacted the environment. We ask that generally, but especially in our work with communities. So these are different ways that depending on in which area you work, because I know not all of you work or want to work in the area of business or social enterprise. Some of you want to be in a non-profit area. Excuse my dog. He hates our neighbors and they just came in. So it depends what kind of sector you're working in, how you will approach measuring the impact that you have. And then last but not least, which I think is very important, is that we also measure internally what impact we have on each other and our own company. So as a founder, this is one of the things that I set up. This is impact business culture. So we have how many people are employed in my company? What are their salaries? Where do they come from? Are we employing people who are marginalized? Are we employing women? Are we employing men? And so on. We work 6+1 hour. We leave 1 hour for unplanned work because the work process today is so fast that we feel that it's easy to go into stress and burnout. So we want to leave 1 hour where you can kind of catch up or do things that you didn't have time to do, and so on and so on. We have the right to make a mistake, flexible work time, no contacting after office hours, and so on. So we try and set up also internal impact that we have on each other and people working in the company, and measure that as well. So our own impact business culture. Okay, and that concludes this kind of a little overview of social impact. I think we have a couple of minutes left. If there are any comments or questions. Quantifying is so strange. How do you measure social value in numbers? Just a comment. Nika, I completely agree. So if you want, I will send you the guidelines for social internal investment. So I don't know if any of you are social scientists or are familiar with qualitative methodology in social science. Yeah, I'll send it. So yeah, there is a long methodological tradition of trying to add numbers or quantities to qualitative situations. And this is, for example, when you do interviews or you do focus groups and you talk to people and you try and get some information from that, which is called, so that process in social science is called codifying, when you code the answers so that you can categorize them, so that you can draw a conclusion. So this is basically on track of that, where you use the qualitative data, you talk to people, you ask them questions. We always, before we go into the implementation, we develop the measuring system. So who do we have to interview? You know, who has to fill out the questionnaire for us, and so on. And we set up the questions and interviews and so on, so that we can measure some things and then add value to them. So for example, I'll give you an example of one of the things that we measured. When we worked with youth in climate, we organized a lobbying exercise, but I didn't want to do a role play. I wanted to actually bring in people that are in the position to make a decision, so that youth can actually lobby them. So we had from the advisor to the president about environment, to the Ministry of Environment, to big corporations, civil society. We had a lot of, about 30 or 40 people who make important decisions every day about environment there, so that the youth can lobby them. And the way that we evaluated and added value was to say, okay, if I'm an activist and I want to get a meeting with a person that is making decisions, and I have to pay a lobbyist to make that happen, how much would I have to pay a lobbyist to get a sit down with the advisor of the president on environment? So we knew the value of that, let's say, meeting, and then we calculated. So it's a very long procedure. So you try and kind of see the value on the market, let's say, of the activity that you provided. If these people, so we did a policy lab, if they wanted to learn how to do a policy lab and they did a semester and they had to pay for it, how much would that cost them? How many people were there? So if everybody has to pay, you know, 3,000 euro for one semester to get this kind of knowledge, and there's 30 people, and then you multiply that. So it's a very complicated procedure, but it can be done. It's not exact in my opinion. What is the difference between social entrepreneurship and social responsibility? Okay, so this is from Ketevan. I don't know if you were here the last time when we discussed social entrepreneurship. Social entrepreneurship, in short, means a type of business that fills certain criteria, which means you have to be on the market. By some criteria, you have to make at least 25% of your income from the market. You have to be, from the profit that you make, you have to use 75% of the profit to reinvest it in the community. and not more than 25 can be of profit can be paid out to, let's say, owners or people who own stocks. You have to have, let's say, democratic procedure of decision making within the company. So there are several criteria how, depending on where you are from and what kind of legislation is in place and so on, what is a social enterprise. But the main thing about social enterprise is that you are not, your goal is not to generate money. Money is your means to a goal of social change. So as a business, you want to change this community or world, but you're using money in creating money to reach that goal. While if you're an entrepreneur, your goal is to make money. Now, if you're not a social entrepreneur, so you're just an entrepreneur or a corporation, you do still have an impact on the society, environment, and so on, and that's your social responsibility. So there's a difference. So both the social entrepreneur and the entrepreneur have a social responsibility, but in social enterprise, that social responsibility is the reason for your existence. While as an entrepreneur, the reason for your existence is to create profit, but you do or do not recognize that in the process of creating profit, you have a certain social responsibility. Okay, yeah, and so there is a lot of this terminology flying around. So you have impact business. So this is, again, not a social enterprise, but a business that recognizes some of the elements and changes them in order to make a more positive impact. But it doesn't have to, it doesn't have any rules on how much profit it can keep. It doesn't have any rules on being on the market, not being on the market, or how the business is run. So basically, if you don't have very clear in your founding documents rules on profit, structure, decision making, and so on, in order to reach the values that are integral to social entrepreneurship, then you're not a social entrepreneur. Then you're either an entrepreneur, an impact entrepreneur, a business that has a corporate social responsibility, and so on. Okay, so are there any more questions? If you have questions and they pop up later today or tomorrow, you can always email me. I will definitely send you this presentation, and I will send you the social return on investment guidebook, and I will send you a link to the communities that do a social impact measurement so that you can see what kind of tools exist. Is there anything else that I can help you with, or questions that you have? No? Oh, thank you for being here. I know it's for most of you after work time, so it's really been a pleasure, and thank you so much for listening and participating.
Thank you, everyone. So we will share with you the presentation and the promised materials. Thank you, Tamara, so much for, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, sorry.
Yeah, thank you so much for your nice webinar. Well, so informative again. And I would like to ask also our participants to come back to us and fill in the feedback form. So I will email a link to you.
Yes, definitely fill out the form, because that will help me to analyze my social impact that I have had with webinars. I'm also sending you, I just sent my email if you have any questions or want to ask me anything, and I'll provide the materials that I've said, and do feel free to ask for advice or any resources or anything.
Okay, thank you so much. Have a nice evening, everyone. Bye-bye.
Great evening, bye.